Hello everyone, and welcome back to Fallout 76, where today we're going to take a look at what I think is one of the more interesting locations in the game, the Burrows. The location was added during the Wild Appalachia expansion, which I still believe was criminally underrated. The Burrows was a bit infamous when it launched, being described as a challenging, high-level dungeon quest when in reality it was pretty easy and pretty short. There was a lot of disappointment surrounding that launch, but really, I think that had more to do with poor communication and hype on Bethesda's part than on the actual quality of the location and the story it contained. Today, we'll dive into that story and learn what exactly went on in the Burrows both before and after the Great War. Remember, if you like videos like this and you want to see more, do go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, follow me on Twitter. I'm going to be doing more Fallout 76 lore videos in the near future, so if you're into that, you've found the right place. Now let's get started. First, to find the Burrows, you want to travel to Harper's Ferry. There you can find 2 manhole covers that you can use to get into the wastewater system under the town. Once you get underground, you'll find a Brotherhood corpse lying on the ground. If it's your first time here, the corpse will have a holotape titled Burrows Mission Brief, and that starts the waste management quest. I already started that quest on this character, but I can still go through here and find the holotape to play for you to get started on the story.
Romeo Squad, this is Defiance. Priority message follows. Intel shows a significant amount of military robotics at the Harper's Ferry pump station. Proceed to the location through the city sewer and conduct recon to identify the source. Report back by 0700. Ad Victoriam.
So at some point after the war, the old Appalachian Brotherhood of Steel came here investigating something, and it looks like it didn't go their way. In addition to the holotape, we also find a terminal entry titled Community Introduction on the Burrows Terminal Network. Friend, welcome to the Burrows, the one remaining safe haven in Harper's Ferry where people can live in peace and community. Before the bombs, this place was an old storm sewer where people with nothing could live a real life. And now we're trying to keep that spirit alive today. If you're down on your luck, lost everything, or had nothing to begin with, we have a place for you. Follow the main drain tunnel to the central chamber, and we'll get you placed in one of many neighborhoods spread throughout the tunnels. Please stop by soon. We'd love to get to know you, the Burrows community. With that, we now know 2 things about the Burrows. 1, the old Brotherhood of Steel sent people down here to investigate the source of hostile robots, and it looks like they died doing it. Not good. 2, at some point after the war, but presumably before the Brotherhood came down here, this place was some kind of post-apocalyptic community, one that at least has traditions dating back to before the war. The introduction sounded friendly enough, but that probably isn't the case anymore. We'll have to explore deeper into the tunnels to find out more about what happened to this place. Now, it's important to note here that what I'm going to do in this video today is explore the story of the Burrows. This place is a convoluted maze of tunnels, makeshift settlements, drain pipes, and sewage streams. I'm not going to pretend for a minute that I know how to navigate it, because I don't. I stumble my way through here every time I visit, and you probably will too. So if you want to learn your way around, you'll need to do some exploring on your own, but we will cover the whole story, don't worry. I found all the lore and put it together in a nice, neat, organized little package for you. Let's get back to it. As we explore the Burrows, it becomes clear that regardless of what was going on here before, the place is now completely infested with ghouls. If you've got some experience in Fallout 76, it shouldn't be too much of a challenge to get through here, but low-level players may want to wait a bit before coming in. The enemies will scale with you to a point, but ghouls don't tend to drop weapons or ammo, so if you're going to try it early on, make sure you're well stocked before you drop in. As for why there are ghouls here, well, that's hard to say, at least for now. Are they what's become of the people who used to live here? Are they getting in from somewhere else? We'll have to keep exploring to find out. One of the first remnants of the Burrows' former civilization we find is this cafeteria space. There's plenty of tables and chairs all around, a very helpful menu on a chalkboard, advertising the appetizing meals the community has to offer, and even a locked pantry where we can pick through a little bit of unused food. Looking around the area, we can find a note on one of the tables titled Burrows Warning.
Warning. Avoid going through the central chamber. Marcus and his goons have started patrolling the area and setting up turrets. Getting caught by them won't end well for you. Please exit here or further up the tunnels. Pass it on to everyone you can think of. We can't lose anybody else to this senseless violence.
It sounds like someone named Marcus led a gang and took over part of the Burrows. To avoid whatever violent hassle they might cause, residents seem to just try to avoid their territory. Interesting. Let's file that away. Deeper into the tunnels, we find a retractable bridge. Fortunately, we don't really need to extend or retract it to get across. Players with Marsupial will be able to make the jump, and those without it can just use the stairs nearby as long as they don't mind getting some mildly radioactive sewage on their shoes. When we do get to the terminal, we can learn a little more about what this place was like before the war by reading a work log posted by Andrew Horn, dated 2074.
Description. Came to the bridge to look at a faulty line and found a couple of the regulars. Told them to pack up and head out before I called the cops on them for trespassing. Hate to do it to the poor fellas. They're not hurting anyone, and from the look of them, they could use a helping hand, but the law's the law, I suppose.
Tells us that before the war, not only was this a place that the poor and homeless would come to for shelter, but that it was also actively being managed. There were people that worked here, and the people who did work here, at least some of them, were sympathetic to the plight of those they'd run into. But because of the way society was at that time, they were compelled to follow the rules and kick them out when they found them. They wouldn't want to risk their jobs or their own livelihoods for breaking the rules. For now, we'll just file this information away. There's more to learn about what was going on here before the war, but we won't see any more of that until a bit later. Going deeper into the tunnels, one of the next things we can stumble across is a corpse. It's next to a door labeled Do Not Enter. Beside the corpse, we find a note titled To Pete.
Okay, Pete. I didn't want to write a note like I'm your damn mom or something, but I'm getting sick of sending out crews to look for the keys you lost. You take something off the shelf, you put it back. Understand? Put the keys back in the throne room before we have to beat some common sense into you, Marcus.
This marks our first, for lack of a better word, encounter with the infamous Marcus. And apparently he has a throne room? Maybe there was more going on here than just a little gang activity. As tempting as going through a door labeled Do Not Enter might be, I think we need to leave that alone for now and go find this throne room. It's actually not far from where we are now, really just a straight shot to the left if we're facing that Do Not Enter door, but it's easy to miss and get turned around. It's also easy to get distracted by the nearby workbench, armory that can be raided, and other interesting things lying around. Once we spot it, it's clearly a throne room, and it's got some new residents, a handful of ghouls. Once we dispatch the ghouls, sure enough, we find the key to that door on the nightstand. Apparently, Pete was courteous enough to return it before conveniently dropping dead next to the door it opens. In addition to the key, we also find the Burrow Boys terminal. It must be communally owned by Marcus and his gang. There's an entry advising where to find the tunnel key in case we didn't find that other note, or if we couldn't spot it on the nightstand. There's also another entry that details some of what Marcus and his gang were doing here. But before we go into that, let's listen to the holotape Marcus left behind for a really accurate look at what was happening here.
All right, people, settle in, settle in. All right, now, I asked that all the Burrows folk gather here today because I'm making a little announcement. As of right now, the Burrows boys are withdrawing from our little alliance and claiming ownership over these tunnels. Now, for some of you, that is probably confusing. Maybe you're asking yourself, Marcus, what's that mean for the Burrows? What's it mean for me? Well, friends, it's really pretty damn simple. It means that, as of now, I own everything in these tunnels. The rats you eat, the mold growing on your mattress, the bricks you are standing on. They're all mine. But, not to worry, I will be a kind and fair ruler. I will let you continue using my facilities if you obey one very simple rule. And that is to follow my every order to a T. I tell you to do something, you do it. I need something, you get it. I ask you for the moon, you figure out how to pull that SOB out of the sky and bring it right down here to me.
And if we refuse?
Well, you could do that. You could. But you'd be more screwed than you already are. Look around, Trish. My boys are the only ones here with guns, and the only ones that know anything about fighting. None of you can touch us. You wouldn't stand a chance. I understand you folks have gotten used to the chummy, love your neighbor bullshit. But the New World Order is here. Now, I get it. That is some bitter medicine to swallow. But if I need to help you force it down, just know that I am more than happy to oblige.
That was Marcus, probably the archetypical post-apocalyptic megalomaniac, very reminiscent of Negan from The Walking Dead or Clay from the Commune series. We've seen this kind of character throughout Post-Apocalyptia. Marcus and his gang took over the Burrows, basically enslaved everyone, all in the name of power and greed, because for some reason, these characters just won't rest until their piles of wasteland garbage are bigger than everyone else's piles of wasteland garbage. We're also introduced to someone named Trish, possibly a local leader. I wonder if she'll make trouble for Marcus. Looking back to the terminal, we can get a little more insight into how the Burrow boys ran the place.
Weekly upkeep list. Things that need to happen to keep this train on the tracks. Scav runs are required twice a week or more to keep our mouths and guns fed. If it doesn't happen, then we go back to eating sewer rat, and that lasts about a week before the guys start taking their frustrations out on each other. The water station needs to be manned at all times. We have water as far as the eye can see, but that shit'll kill you if it isn't boiled, not to mention the taste. I hated helping my father out down here, but it turned out to be a lifesaver. Learned all sorts of useful stuff about the security, mainly how easy it is to get into. If we keep them stocked with bullets and not falling apart, they'll keep this place under our control. The usual, take shit off the bodies of morons that wander in here and add it to the pile. Hail to the king. Saving this to commemorate the Burrows boys taking over. No more happy-go-lucky community shares everything horse shit. No more pioneer scout helping your fellow man for no damn reason nonsense. No more mooching off the world and not earning your keep. No more pretending that things can ever work the same way they once did. The New World has no place for people not strong enough to take what they need. Good riddance.
We learned two important things here. First, Marcus is the son of one of the former employees who kept this place running. That's why he has some knowledge of the area and probably how he established himself as a leader. Second, he mentioned something about security, something about keeping them stocked with ammo and controlling their targeting so the Burrow boys could stay in control. One must assume that he's talking about robotic security. We haven't seen any of that yet, but it was what brought the Brotherhood of Steel here in the first place, so maybe Marcus is a little sharper than the average wasteland raider. But there are still more questions. How did the other people in the Burrows react to this? How did all of it turn out in the end? We find a few more clues as we explore. On a table in one of the residential areas, we find a note titled Maud's Journal.
Marcus, that son of a bitch. How could he? Kicking us out of our home? Why? He's given all of us a death sentence. The people he called family. After his speech, a few of those folks said, "Why don't we fight? Why don't we do anything at all?" It would be foolish. Marcus's group is armed and prepared. They're all strong men, younger than most of us. We wouldn't stand a chance. As much as I hate it, we have to leave. But we're not leaving empty-handed. I talked it over with some of the elders. Tonight, we're going to take back some of the supplies the Burrow boys took as a tribute and leave through the old tunnels. It's dangerous, but Marcus knows that and won't follow us. We can get to the pump station, seal the doors, maybe hack the security system. We can figure it out later. All I know is that if we stay here, we're dead.
So some of the people decided that because they couldn't really fight, they'd just leave. Seems sensible enough. It doesn't sound like Marcus and the Burrow boys were going to make life easy on them, and it makes plenty of sense. There's really no logical reason for people to follow a leader like Marcus, not when the entire world is open to explore. But it sounds like they had a dangerous plan. Maybe we can learn some more. In one of the deeper, darker corners of the Burrows, we find a holotape labeled "Warning for Dylan." And it's from Trish, the woman we heard mentioned on Marcus's terminal. Let's give it a listen.
Dylan, I hope you find this when you get back. I need you to listen to me. We can't stay here anymore. Marcus, that son of a bitch, I should have known he'd... The point is, you need to grab your things and leave as soon as possible. Oh, and don't try to leave through Central. One of his goons will just hold you up and get your shit. Alright, I'm headed to Mosstown now. I love you, and I hope to see you soon.
Now we have a destination, Mosstown. It also sounds like maybe Marcus didn't have ironclad control over the entries and exits from the Burrows. Sure, some of the people planned to go through the dangerous pumping station, but there weren't any specific instructions for Dylan. Maybe Trish knew he would know another way out, or maybe the other note was meant to be a distraction. I don't know, we'll figure that all out. Maud, Dylan, and Trish weren't the only ones heading out and going to Mosstown. We can also find a place called Dr. Ken's Chem Den. This must have been a popular spot in the Burrows. Seeing as the people here lived in sewage and ate rats, it stands to reason that they might want a little bit of a chemical escape on occasion. Let's check out Dr. Ken's terminal.
Relocation. Ladies and gents, due to a change in management, thanks to the fine folks in the Central Chamber, Dr. Ken's Chem Den is relocating to Mosstown. If any part of that pink lump in your cranium still works, I'd suggest you do the same. I look forward to continuing your treatment with the same high-quality chems at the same low prices. Business hours. I'm here Tuesdays and Thursdays from whenever the hell I wake up to right before sundown when the creepy crawlies come out. Remember the slogan, feeding your addiction with the highest quality chems you can afford. Menu. Standard fare. Glue and paints for all your sniffing needs. Buff out and booze for those seeking a good time on a budget. The hard stuff. Med-X Psycho. Locked behind the counter, so you're gonna have to ask for it. You think I'd keep it on the shelf for you junkies to steal? Exotic tastes. Hear me out. If you're looking for the cutting edge of getting high, some of my more adventurous customers told me they got a real rush inhaling the fumes of, well, cow droppings. So if that's your thing, let me know. And boring doctor things. I guess if you have a cold or snotty or something, I can dig up a disease cure, but it'll cost you.
There's some interesting stuff here. Obviously, Dr. Ken also planned on relocating to Mosstown with everyone else. He was also clearly more of a drug dealer than a doctor, but when an entire population lives in conditions like the Burrows, maybe providing that chemical escape is a little more therapeutic than recreational. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt, considering that he's working with limited resources. The other interesting note was the one about sniffing cow droppings. There's been a lot of debate and hand-wringing in the Fallout lore community about the origins of Jet, a chem that we don't see in Fallout 76 because it presumably wasn't invented yet. Supposedly it was invented by Myron in New Reno in Fallout 2. But we also saw some Jet in what we assume to be a pre-war safe in Fallout 4. Was that just an error? I tended to think so, but maybe, just maybe, it did exist before the war, or maybe people started to figure it out just after the war. Maybe Myron wasn't the actual inventor of Jet. Maybe it was just discovered by wastelanders who were desperate enough for an escape that they started sniffing cow shit. You know what? I think it's one of those nitpicky little things that maybe they're just having a little fun with us on. But regardless, that's enough about all that, unpleasant as it may be. Now it's time to head back to that do not enter door that we saw earlier and continue on the quest the Brotherhood of Steel failed to complete and find out what's going on with all these robots that they supposedly found. When we go through the door, we find a deep, dark, creepy tunnel, and that tunnel is of course going to be filled with ghouls. We can try and sneak our way through, but ultimately we're going to have to deal with them. We got lucky with a legendary there. It's nothing too crazy to handle, especially if you're a stealthy character. You don't have to worry about getting mobbed too much. But eventually, you make your way through the tunnel, and you find a terminal. On the shelves next to it, you also find a first aid kit, some ammo, and a 10mm submachine gun, so if you're in need of those things, you can grab them. But we'll just go ahead and access the pump station access terminal, and we see two things. Important notice, pump station access sealed due to hazardous gas levels. Use pressure release valve to restore door control. Nearest valve location, north end of old tunnel. So we'll have to go find that, but before we do, we can read another work log titled Old Tunnel Renovation. This one entered by Earl R. Jeter in 2072.
Work was finally approved to begin renovation here. These tunnels are the oldest part of the stormwater system and frankly fallen apart. Due to potential infrastructure issues, plans have been approved to bypass water flow around these sections. Access will be preserved as they still house pipework that we didn't secure funding to reroute. Not to mention, it's currently the only way to access the pump station. What a mess.
This gives us a little more insight into what was going on here before the war. There was a renovation project underway to modernize the stormwater system, but it sounds like they were only dealing with part of it, at least at that point. Clearly, based on what we've seen in the rest of the Burrows, they didn't get very far. Once we hunt down the pressure release valve at the north end of the tunnel, we can release it, which will allow us to go back and open the door. Unfortunately, turning it wakes up some more ghouls that we'll need to fight off. No big deal for my character, but you don't want to get taken by surprise. I've also occasionally seen rad rats down here, but I haven't noticed them for a while, so that particular spawn may have been changed. When we return to the terminal, we'll have a new option to open the door, which will give us access to a fully renovated, modernized section of the facility. Sure enough, this one is totally ghoul-free, but is being patrolled by Robotic Security in the form of Colonel Gutsies. Again, these aren't a huge impediment for my high-level character here, but a handful of these guys can be a problem if you're here at a low level. After clearing out the Gutsies, we make our way to the upper level of the section. Here, I should note that there's all kinds of good junk lying around, which is really true of all of the Burrows. And most importantly, we find another terminal. This one will require you to hack it, and it's a skill level 3 terminal. So aren't you glad you have me here to show you what's in it so you don't have to be bothered to swap your perk cards around? It's called the Observation Deck Terminal, and once we're in, we see 2 entries: Work Log Last Day and Turret Control. This work log is dated from 2075 by John L. Welch, a data analyst.
18 years of operating this station and the bastards come in last week telling us to clean out our things. Everything's going fully automated. I understand the systems will find and fix errors quicker, but what I don't understand is where the hell they get off ruining a man's livelihood. I added an executable to the turret defense system they're so proud of. Just a little parting gift before they kick me out. It would be a real shame if something or someone accidentally activated them.
Like so many things in Appalachia leading up to the Great War, this station became fully automated and everyone working in it lost their jobs. This guy, though, he decided to get a little revenge. He reprogrammed the turrets so they'd kill anyone else who decided to venture inside. I'm guessing this was Marcus's dad, simply based on the shared murderous tendencies. Fortunately for us, we can turn those turrets off right from here, making the last room in the facility at least a little bit safer to venture into. This is where we reach the end of the waste management quest line. If we didn't deactivate those terminals, they'd pop up and start shooting at us. It's also possible to have some Gutsies spawn in here as well, but that didn't happen for me this time. The main thing we get is an Assaultron as the boss. You can see here, with my high-level character, I dispatch that Assaultron very, very efficiently. You again, at a lower level, may have a little more trouble than that. But for me, it was no problem. Once we loot it, the quest completes. Upon completion, we get some pretty typical quest rewards, a random legendary item. We get the Gutter, which is a unique Assaultron blade. It gives us superior damage and the Vampire's legendary effect. It's a decent little weapon if you are a lower level player, but probably not something you're going to get a ton of mileage out of later in the game. We also get a couple of random other quest rewards as to be expected. But now we have a terminal we can go into and get a little more lore before wrapping this one up. The first thing we see is there's a holotape in here titled For Maud, and it's from Marcus.
Hello, Maudie. Hopefully you're still alive to hear this after my modifications to the bot targeting parameters. If you are, you have probably noticed that all the exits topside are sealed shut, and you are so screwed. I get it, Maud. You thought you were safe. You thought you built a home for all those helpless saps down here and refused to give way to how the world really works now. Yeah, that's how I knew you'd pull some dumb shit like this. Before you and your crew ran off into the tunnels like a bunch of rats, you asked me why I was doing all of this. Now the reasoning is, it's pretty simple. The mean guys always win, Maud. Things are no different now than before the bombs. Hell, it's the reason most of us landed down here in the first place. I just figured I may as well be the one to mean up before somebody else beat me to it. Sorry. I was just thinking how my daddy would be so proud of me. You know, his boy following in his footsteps in waste management. I will see you in hell, Maud.
And there we have it. This corpse sitting on the ground next to me here that we saw a moment ago, I'm guessing that's Maud. It's just labeled Settler, but I'm betting it's Maud. It sounds like Marcus was right, and the bad guys won. I'm not sure that anyone made it out of here alive. Maybe they thought they could, maybe someone made it out through an alternate exit, but this doesn't look good. I'll go into my reasoning for this when we visit Mosstown in a few minutes, but first, let's see what else is on this terminal. We'll start with another work log, Robot Fabricators, dated March 8th, 2075, entered by James E. Peake. Now that's a couple weeks after the turrets were reset by Mr. Welch, so maybe James Peake was capable of reprogramming them on his own, thus avoiding being inconveniently murdered when he went to work. Here's what he has to say.
Completed installation of the Robot Fabricators. As of now, this station is fully automated. Personally, I think they went overboard with the military-grade security, but hey, I'm sure the defense contract secured an 8th yacht for some bigwig asshole at Robco.
I agree with him. This military-grade security does seem like total overkill for a facility like this one. He tends to chalk it up to greed on the part of Robco executives, but the next entry sheds some more light on what was really going on. The entry is simply titled Automated Status Report, and it's dated 5/10/2101. That's pretty recent. It must still be getting updates. We can see that the project designation is Whitespring Pipeline. Status is ongoing. Power consumption 240 volts AC. Peak range 90 gallons per minute. Amount dispersed 600,000 gallons. So that's what was really happening here. This wasn't about cleaning up the stormwater system or the sewer system. It was about creating a water pipeline to the Whitespring bunker. That explains a lot. Look at all the ghouls that are here. Look at all the ghouls that we find at the Whitespring. Perhaps they're able to make their way through this pipeline system at will, and that explains why we have an endless supply of ghouls to kill at the Whitespring. It's kind of hard to say, but obviously all of this adds up, and it really explains why we had such high-grade military security here and very little interest in maintaining anything else in the Burrows. Lastly, we have an option for remote door control. That's going to open up the gate on this pipe here. And through that pipe, if we want to get out of the Burrows, we can swim our way down by jumping through this pipe, opening a valve, and eventually getting out of the Burrows. And once you close it, you can't reopen it. So we have no choice but to go ahead and swim. And it's really dark in here, but I think we can figure it out. Yeah, we'll turn on our Pip-Boy light, just have a quick look. I think there's a valve to turn down here. There it is. Turn the valve, it's going to open the gate. And then we can swim ourselves to freedom. Back closer to the beginning of the Burrows, where we can either wander our way out or just fast travel away. In this case, I'm just going to fast travel away, and we're going to take a trip to Mosstown and see if there's any evidence for anyone making it out of the Burrows and heading over there. When we get to Mosstown, we find a settlement that's now infested with Scorched. This makes sense as there's a Fisher site right next door. Whoever was living here, whether they made it here from the Burrows or not, didn't have a happy ending. We can see that at one time this was a thriving settlement with plenty of shops and living quarters filling it out. What we don't see is any specific evidence that any of the named characters from the Burrows ever actually made it here. We do see one note that could allude to Dr. Ken getting here. It's titled Swamp Butter, and it reads as follows. I cannot make it out to see the afflicted in person, but based on what you've told me, I would recommend keeping a close eye on anyone exhibiting the symptoms you described. I also advise that you immediately stop using the so-called swamp butter in your meal preparation, as it is a toxic mold. Did that note come from the infamous Dr. Ken, or from some other wasteland doctor who just happened to already live in Mosstown? We also find another note pinned to a doorway as we enter a lounge. Also at that doorway, we see a sign that simply says drugs. Maybe Dr. Ken operated out of here? The note reads lounge rules, no pay, no sleep, caps up front, no outside chems. Is this where Dr. Ken was operating from in Mosstown? Once again, we have no name, no evidence to indicate that it was in fact Dr. Ken. It could have been anyone. There are no notes here from Maud or Trish, no holotapes, no terminal entries. An argument could be made that this location was here before the Burrows was released, so maybe it was just overlooked, or maybe it was just some kind of half-assed retcon, but I'm not sure I buy that. It doesn't line up with everything else we saw added in Wild Appalachia. All the other characters and stories added in that expansion lined up perfectly with the world. Terminal entries mentioned minor characters that wouldn't come until Wastelanders. Tiny environmental details matched exactly what was going on, to the point that years later, it took content from future updates to make those environmental details make sense. I find it hard to believe that if these people were to have made it out of the Burrows and all the way to Mosstown, that the writers would simply ignore it. In the grand scheme of all things Fallout 76, adding an extra note or two to the area to mention a character by name would be pretty easy. When I consider how much care was taken with the lore and environment for all the other Wild Appalachia content, I just can't believe that this was an oversight. The notion that no one made it out of the Burrows alive also lines up with the overall tone of the rest of Wild Appalachia's content. It was all dark, super dark. Friendships got ruined by jealousy and perceived betrayal. People turned into cannibals and wendigos. A guy was disfigured by a robotic sheep squatch that he created. Girlfriends abandoned their wheelchair-bound boyfriends. Schoolyard best friends murdered each other over board games. You're telling me that the same people who wrote all of that suddenly decided to write a story where all the people just got out to safety? Sure, they got scorched eventually, and that's sad, but it's the same old sad we'd already seen. not even close to being on par with Wild Appalachia levels of sadness. I don't buy it. I think the mean guys won. Nobody made it out of the Burrows alive. As for what happened to Marcus and his gang, well, that's left wide open. Maybe, and I really hope we do, maybe we'll get another chance to meet Marcus in a future story expansion. I think he'd make for a really interesting character, especially if the Burrows could become populated with his raider gang. Truthfully, I think the Burrows is one of the coolest looking areas in the game, and it's a shame that the only reason we have to go there is for daily ops. I'd love to see some real story content with interesting characters get added there. Maybe the option for a player home inside, depending on the choices we make in an associated quest line. What can I say? A guy can dream, right? But that, my friends, is all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the Burrows with me, and I hope you'll go in and spend some time there yourself. I hit all the lore points you'll find there, at least I think I did, but there's a really detailed and thoughtfully designed environment in that settlement. It tells a whole side of the story that I barely touched on in this video, so next time you're thinking you have nothing to do in Fallout 76, if you haven't spent any time exploring the Burrows on your own, go for it. You might be surprised by what you find. Remember, as always, if you liked this video and you want to see more, do go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, follow me on Twitter. There's always a lot more to come on the channel. We're going to be doing more lore videos. Fallout 76 streams every week. There's all kinds of stuff coming for the future, so I do hope that I see you all next time.